Hello, dear students. In the first part of this lecture, I have discussed some concept of post-colonialism, some nomenclatures related with it, and colonial discourse, where the grand narratives of colonialism perceives the colonizing West and colonized East as binary, means mutually exclusive opposites. Post-colonialism refers to a theoretical and critical strategies used to examine the culture, literature, politics, history of the European colonies. Its focus is on the aftermath of European colonialism. It reveals Europeans' oppression, subjugation, and exploitation done at various levels: territorial, economic, political, social, and cultural, and impact of this exploitation on the natives. So, where there is a power, there is a resistance. Resistance of the colonized against this oppression is another important theme of post-colonialism. The natives, the non-European, the colonized, they started many anti-colonial movements. Like in India, Mahatma Gandhi started Swadeshi, self-reliance, Swaraj, self-rule, Satyagraha, and many movements. In the wake of Said's theory of misrepresentation of East by West, rereading and re-examination of colonial writings have taken place. Now this critical analytical approach spans multiple disciplines in the social sciences, humanities, film studies to literary criticism. Postcolonialism is a way of reading and interpretation. It is a theory and a methodology that examines the nature of Euro-American nations' conquest. So earlier it was related with only the European colonialism, but now it is studying European and American nations' conquest, domination and exploitation of countries and cultures in South America, Asia, Africa, and regions like Canada and Australia. The post-colonial inquiry tracks both historically the period of European empires and in the contemporary neocolonialism. Some important post-colonial theorists, writers, and leaders. J.C. Young calls Said, Bhabha, Spivak as the Holy Trinity. Then we have various writers: Frantz Fanon, Chinua Achebe, Wole Soyinka, Jamaica Kincaid, Pucci Amicheta, and Salman Rushdie. These are significant writers who are writing about post-colonial themes. Now we have intellectuals and political readers whose anti-colonial activism and political movements supported post-colonial thought. Mahatma Gandhi, Tagore, Aimé Césaire, Leopold Senghor, they have started Negritude movement. This movement, Negritude movement, is black colonized people's response to colonialism to assert their own black identity and consciousness. Post-colonial countries today examine the making of colonies and empires not only in history but also, more importantly, critiques the continuities of these older empires in the form of neocolonialism and US imperialism. It is new version, new form, or you can say shadowy or indirect form of colonialism, but it is very dangerous form. of colonialism, Euro-American nations are controlling indirectly the economics, culture, politics, epistemology, ideology of third and fourth world. First world means developed countries, Euro-American countries have their hegemony, means dominance over the world, especially third and fourth world, and they're trying to regulate their economy, politics, socio-cultural aspects by one or another means. From the dominance of European languages, especially English, English is used as language of communication, global trade. In the wake of English, local languages are slowly dying. To consumer products, take for example, the craze for becoming white, beautiful, for fair complexion, or craze for jeans. These all things are coming from the Euro-American worlds, and the people all over the world are crazy for it. So, from the dominance of European languages to consumer products to entertainment, cultural imperialism in the age of globalization is the most visible face of neocolonialism. Western models of dressing, eating, and social interactions begin to acquire a tenacious hold in the post-colonial nation, even as several local cultural practices and products, from yoga to ethnic art, get commercialized for profit in the Western market. The economy of this nation is being controlled by the power outside the nation states, subsidies, structural adjustment program, foreign direct investment, disinvestment, privatization, and what the strategies they are using. Threats of trade sanctions and military actions. In economics or academia, westernized intellectuals, specialists, and cultural intermediaries determine the debates, policies, and action of governments and institutions and control the flow of ideas. Surprisingly, all the theories flowing from Euro-American nations, we are eagerly grasping that. The literary prizes in the world are generated from Euro-American nations. Nobel Prize, Booker Prize, and writers are writing keeping an eye on the global literary market with an aim to get prizes. The third world academics are shaped by Western thoughts. The another form of this is e-empire that comprises communicative networks, electronic commerce, modes of production, techno-colonialism. These are the ways through which they are controlling the world. For an example, how you see our children, they are entrapped by the games like PUBG, Blue Whale, so on. And it is a very crucial time. We all are during this lockdown period using the app Zoom, despite knowing it is hacking the data. Now discuss this very term, post-colonialism. The very nomenclature seems to trap the non-European nation within a European history, that their histories may only be measured in terms of pre-colonial, colonial, or post-colonial. In fact, the colonial period is ongoing, and post-colonial perspectives contribute an original understanding of our colonial present. Some significant writers whose works are very important in post-colonial discourse: Bill Ashcroft et al., The Empire Writes Back; Ngugi wa Thiong'o, Decolonizing the Mind; Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak's The Significant Essay, Can the Subaltern Speak; Homi Bhabha's The Location of Culture, Nation and Narration, Postcolonial Criticism. Paul Gilroy's work on British and black identities in There Ain't No Black in the Union Jack has added a new dimension to post-colonial theory, that of diaspora, multiculturalism and cosmopolitanism. Homi Bhabha is the leading contemporary critic who has tried to disclose the contradictions inherent in colonial discourse, means the study of European representations of non-European cultures and peoples, in order to highlight the colonizer's ambivalence in respect to his position toward the colonized other. Homi Bhabha's work makes a significant departure from the Saidian paradigm by revealing how colonial discourse, means the study of European representations of non-European cultures and people, was often internally flawed, contradictory and divisive, and often failed. He rejected binarism that divides the world into superior civilized West, inferior uncivilized East. So he rejected this binarism, homogeneous category, the simple polarization of the world into self, us, as in white European, and other, them, as in brown, black, non-European of colonial discourse. He opposed the idea of colonial discourse that fixed the very identity of the natives. Identity is not fixed or monolithic. For him, it is unstable. Identities in the colonial encounter are never stable or fixed, but it functions as transaction between colonizer and colonized. Bhabha proposes that colonial discourse is actually ambivalent. Ambivalent means mixed, heterogeneous, not homogeneous. In his book, The Location of Culture, he deploys concepts such as mimicry, means imitation, hybridity, to challenge the colonial production of binary oppositions: center, margin, civilized, savage, enlightened, ignorant, suggesting that cultures interact, transgress, and transform each other in a much more complex manner than binary oppositions allow. So he gave his theory of ambivalence. Ambivalence means mixed feelings, contradictory ideas about something. It refers simultaneously attraction toward and repulsion from an object, person, or action. Ambivalence is a term first developed in psychoanalysis to describe a continual fluctuation between wanting one thing and wanting its opposites. The colonizer, they want and need the colonized. They should be very much similar like them, but they also reject this very idea because they are having a dual feelings and ideas towards the colonized subjects. They want to reform them, modernize them, but expect them to remain submissive. Take example of the case of Mahatma Gandhi. Mahatma Gandhi, who was a lawyer, an educated man, attiring very much like the masters. But his presence was objected in the first-class coach. When he refused to move to rear end of the train, he was thrown out. Ambivalence is the mark of the erosion of colonial authority in Bhabha's interpretation. Revising Said's notion of fixed homogeneity, Bhabha emphasizes ambivalence, divided, uncertain, unstable, mixed feelings of European for non-European. The colonizer wants and needs the colonized to be similar to himself, but not exactly same, otherwise they will start overruling them. If the colonized continues to behave in his traditional ways, he brings no economic gain to the colonizer, then they have this problem. They want to train them because this way they will be able to bring some help to them. But if the colonized changes too much and is found to be exactly the same as the colonizer is left with no argument for his supremacy. So the colonizer wants to maintain his supremacy. He wants to change the servant. He wants to educate them, modernize them, but wants to remain them as a servant only. Bhabha has used another term to define it, that is fetish phobia. Fetish means unusual desire for something, fascination for something that coexist in the colonizer's attitude. Europeans are deeply divided in their perceptions and responses towards the native. This ambivalence results in what Bhabha terms the fetish phobia phenomenon. Example, the native's culture ritual at once is very attractive but also frightening. Like Kurj in The Heart of Darkness, who wants to exterminate broods but becomes himself a brood, participating in natives' rituals. At the end, Marlowe in Heart of Darkness sees the heart of darkness not in the interiors of Africa but in London itself. The colonial master is actually informed by two contradictory psychic states, what Bhabha terms fetish and phobia. He argues that fetish phobia structure of colonial relations results in a condition where the white man both fears and desires the other, the black or brown native, because without them his work is incomplete. He needs their help. But while at the same time wishes to erase the difference, the colonizer is both fascinated by the difference and also repulsed by it. The second important term is mimicry. In his next key move to demonstrate the instability of colonial discourse, Bhabha proposes the idea of mimicry in his essay of Mimicry and Man. Mimicry means to imitate in order to entertain or to ridicule. It is a disciplined, conscious imitation of the white man, his culture, language, ways of living, way of behaving by the subservient colonized. That's why in decolonizing period, the leaders like in India, Mahatma Gandhi started boycotting foreign goods, foreign ways of living. And how this is advocated? Through Western education, religion and structures are modes through which the native is trained to think and behave like the white man. Bhabha argues that this act of mimicry is a site where colonial authority, rather than being reinforced, actually breaks down. The native becomes anglicized but is never truly white or Europeanized. In the post-colonial era, the writers explored the agonies of mimic men who fitted neither into Western culture nor their native ones. Defining it, Bhabha says, it is the copying of the colonizing culture, behavior, manners and values by the colonized contains both mockery and certain menace. so that mimicry is at once resemblance and menace. The colonized should become like the colonizer, but simultaneously remain different, almost the same but not quite. The mimicry of the native often consists of both a superficial obedience and a deeper disobedience and mockery, what Barber terms sly civility. The native seems to express servility but in fact articulates resistance. Macaulay's words in his infamous Minute on Indian Education. Now see, I am using the word infamous. For Indian critics or thinkers, it was infamous Minute on Indian Education, but for the colonizer, it was famous, where he wanted to create a class of interpreters. Just remember for what reason this language was taught. Of a class of interpreters between us and the millions whom we govern. A class of persons Indian in blood and color, but English in taste, in opinions, in morals and in intellect. So this English education has created interpreters or babus. They are popularly known as babus or babus. This class of men, the brown sahibs, because they cannot change their color. As Fanon is saying in Black Skin, White Mask, when the natives wanted to become like the white men, using things to become white, they become rather more black. So these sahibs, they can change their color. They can't exactly become like them. So they are brown sahibs. Is painted in contradictory images in the common man's lexicon, that of an educated, dignified man or of a corrupt, deceitful clerk. So in India, these babus were been known as an educated, dignified man, but a corrupted, deceitful clerk. Here I will use opening lines of an application written by a babu. It is an example of Babu English, how he has learned the English, but this English is what kind of English you can understand by reading this letter. Quote, with deep regret and unfeigned sorrowfulness, your poor slave approaches his poor tail to the footsteps of your honors, throne feeling sure he may meet with forgiveness of his sins from your wisdom and goodness. A good example of mimicry, where they are trying to master the language, but how they have mastered the language. French Fanon refers these mimic men in the phrase black skin, white mask. V.S. Naipaul has written a novel, The Mimic Men, and where he is talking about these kind of characters, mimic men. Friday in Daniel Defoe's Robinson Crusoe would be one of these mimic men. Now take the another example, Caliban in Tempest. He is the actual person who was occupying the land, but which has been occupied by the master Prospero, and who taught him the language, his language. And you see the very word Caliban, it's connecting it with cannibal, savage, uncivilized. The following speech delivered by Caliban to Prospero and Miranda makes clear in a very concise form the vexed relationship between the colonized and the colonizer, and how the colonized, they are learning the language, how they are misusing this. As he says, you taught me language and my profit unto. As I know how to curse, the red plague rid you for learning me your language. The mimicry also fails because the colonial master wants the native similar to himself, yet wishes to retain the difference between himself and the natives. The native also repeats and mimics the master, but with subtle variations and nuances. This dual state of mimicry by the native is what Bhabha terms hybridity. Hybridity in post-colonial studies refers to the mixing of races, miscegenation, the mixing of different racial groups and cultures so that new cultures are produced. Bhabha's writing emphasizes the hybridity of cultures or the mixedness or even impurity of cultures. It refers to the fact that cultures are not discrete phenomena. Instead, they are always in contact with one another, and this contact leads to cultural mixedness. Bhabha's non-essentialist theory of culture differs from essential cultural theory of post-colonial discourse. The emphasis on hybridity and the liminal is important because colonial discourses have often set up distinctions between pure cultures. For Bhabha, culture is not a static entity. It is always in a state of flux. It is always changing. So identity and the culture of the people are also hence changing. And hence it never remains the same. This hybridity creates a third space where colonial identity and native identity meet and often contest. Bhabha associates and allocates the third space to the third world literature, the post-colonial literature. Let's discuss what is this third space. The colonizer countries have their own literature. European nations, that literature which has been considered as a classical literature, great literature, grand narratives. This literature has been called as a first kind of literature. And since the time of colonial period, the natives were forced to read it. So language is taught through the literature. Again, it was a very diplomatic policy of the colonizer. They inculcated their literature in the syllabus, and still now we consider it as authentic if we have to learn English. So the colonized people, they have adopted it as it is. They have imitated it. The second kind of literature or space, the colonizer, ruler, forced the colonized, ruled, to study their literature and see the literary development from their viewpoint. The colonized wrote literature. They mastered the language. They started writing it, but not without neglecting the colonizer's literature. Say second kind of literature. For example, Raja Roy's novel. He is writing in English using the form novel, but telling about the very narratives of India, nationalistic movement of India in Kantapura, philosophy of India in the Serpent and the Rope. So this period is known as the period of assimilation, syncretism or adapt, where the natives, they have adapted it. This is the literature, second literature. So the first is by the Europeans. The second is by the native. Now the colonized countries got freedom and tried to resist the dominance by their own literature. Say third kind of literature. Empire writes back. Take example of Rashidi, R.K. Narayan, Arundhati Roy. So this phase is phase of cultural independence. They are using new themes, presenting in a new way. So this is adapt period. Here we reach to the third space theory of Homi Bhabha. Bhabha associates and allocates the third space to the third world literature or the post-colonial literature. The term hybridization takes many forms. It begins with the cultural hybridity, but it expanded its horizon. It talks about linguistic, cultural, political, racial hybridization, etc. Salman Rushdie, Chinua H.B. Wilson Harris, and Amos Tutuola are authors who have combined the linguistic registers of the English language and the English novel with Asian and African folk, pop culture and narrative traditions to produce hybrid creolized works that are unique in their own right. One important book of post-colonial discourse before ending the discussion I want to review, that is The Empire Writes Back. Literature that writes back to the center. Questions, challenges, colonial discourse. This talks about new Englishes. You see, the English that has been used by European masters, that is written with the capital E, but this is a new kind of Englishes such as Creoles, untranslatable words, unusual syntax. These new Englishes expressed new values and identities and rejected old colonial values. But they neglected gender, class and national differences in their definitions, these writers. This is an accusation against it. And they assume that all writing from the ex-colonies was concerned with post-colonial issues, colonial history, colonial discourses, decolonizing the mind. Sometimes claim critics, post-colonial writers do not have empire on their minds. The range and focus of post-colonialism is expanding. Comprehension of post-colonial concepts will enhance our experience about colonial mind setup and ideology with which we still fail to free ourselves. Scrutinize any domain and we can see the visible or invisible form of colonialism. For an example, let's take the game or the sport cricket. The Indians are crazy for cricket and it needs less energy but spacious ground in comparison to any other Indian sports or games like Kabaddi and Kho-Kho. In the sport of Kabaddi, all the players, they get involved actively at the same time. That is not possible in cricket. And it also needs a small arena which is needed for the populated country like India. And through this game, the players, they develop their breathing power. But rarely in India, the game Kabaddi has got any recognition or any other Indian sports in comparison to this European game cricket. Take another example. In the craze to learn and be very much like colonial masters, when our Lord Ram has become Rama and Ramayana has become Ramayana, nobody knows. Surprisingly, in India, the students know the difference between Old and New Testament, but they do not know the difference between Ramayana and Ramcharitmanas. The discussion of post-colonial discourse or concept is very debatable and eye-opening. Hope you have enjoyed the lecture. See you in next discussion. Thank you. Goodbye.